Today, I'm going to show you a simple 7-part lesson plan structure that's going to make you have clarity, simplicity, and confidence in your teaching. And of course, I'm also going to walk you through a real example so you can actually see how a lesson plan is built step by step. So if that all sounds amazing, come on in and let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to Miss Asia Educates. So the lesson plan structure I'm actually going to pan out for you today is going to start with one thing. Before we get into that, we need to understand what a lesson plan is and just the ins and outs of what makes a good lesson plan before we get into the structure. Lesson planning is not about just writing down page numbers from a curriculum. Lesson plans are intricate guides to help you drive instruction from day to day. All right, it is the journey and the roadmap to success. And if you're not lesson planning, you're planning to fail. Lesson plans should not be too long, too lengthy, both instruction and in your writing. It should be short, concise, to the point. Whatever needs to be said, whatever needs to be taught, that is what your lesson plan should entail. Learning happens during practice, not talking. So remember, when we are doing lesson plans, make sure you're planning for you not to be doing majority of talking, but to actually have your child do half, if not majority of the talking. All right. The more and more your child talks, the more and more they're learning. Whoever is talking during the lesson planning process of as we're planning is the one who's learning. And you want to make sure that you're talking just enough to get the point across, and your child picks up on that and they begin to talk and they begin to communicate what they're learning. All right. So if you don't lesson plan, it's often the reason homeschool feels overwhelming and confusing. And obviously, we do not want that. Lesson plans are the gold standard for a goal-oriented homeschool. They help lead with structure. They allow you to tailor learning to your child. They force you to think about how you're teaching, and they help you use different teaching methods intentionally. So we're not just creating a lesson plan that you can just check off a box. We're creating a lesson plan that has strength, resilience, and able to mold with whatever pivot or whatever challenges comes about. And that's what leads to good teaching. Good lesson planning leads to great teaching. And last but not least, let's go ahead and with our foundation. Before we even get into the structure, this foundation needs to be planned out and needs to be used in order for your lesson plan to go smoothly. So it's important for you to, number one, make sure that you understand the standard. You're picking out a standard and you are creating that large standard or that guide. Remember, because standards are just the direction on which you're going. It's the overarching idea, right? So you're going to take your state standard and you're going to create learning goals from that state standard. So I've already got an example that I'm actually going to be walking through this whole process so that you're able to follow along and you're able to see what it looks like in real time as I go through each and every one of the structure processes. All right, so let's go ahead and officially begin. So standards. We start with our standard and we start with our learning goal. A standard example that I decided to use is RI 3.1, which is students will ask and answer questions from a text. All right, that is the standard. That's a big idea. And you can create different goals from that idea. From how does a student ask and answer questions? Student will be able to create questions. Student will be able to read a text and answer questions. There's so many different ways that you can go about attacking that standard. But today I've decided we're going to go from that standard, which is student will be able to ask and answer questions. And today we're just simply going to have the learning goal. The student name that we're going to use today, Susan. So Susan will be able to ask questions using what and where. All right, that is our learning goal. Susan will be able to have who, what, when, and where. When we're creating these two standards, it's really important that even before you get started on really lesson planning day by day, or whatever your designated lesson planning date is, that you start with that standard. And it's probably important for you to start with the standard at the beginning of the month or right before you get into it and then into the learning target so that you have a clear path on, okay, these are the different learning goals to get to that standard. So let me go ahead and map that out for the next week or two, right? So My learning goal for today is Susan will be able to ask questions using who, what, and where. That is our learning goal. All right. So now everything in the lesson is built around that one sentence. Everything. If that's what Susan needs to know by the end, then you have achieved the lesson goal. All right. So let's keep that lesson goal in mind. Susan will be able to ask questions using who, what, and where. All right. So now let's finally go ahead and get into this structure. Structure number one, you want a hook. A hook is simply just something engaging that's going to capture your child's attention. So a hook can be a video. A hook can be a book. A hook can be a funny joke or question. Anything that's going to drive their attention to that subject matter. All right. So in this case, in trying to teach Susan how to use who, what, and where questions, I'm simply just going to play a who, what, and where video, a 5W video. All right. And the 5W just simply means who, what, when, where, and why. So there's a lot of different videos on YouTube that hit on that subject. So I'm going to go ahead and get her attention by playing that video. That's an example of a hook. All right. And of course, a hook could be just anything that connects your child to the information. So you're going to type in hook, something engaging. Number two, then what you're going to jump into is you are going to really hone in on, oh, and I forgot to say this. I just looked at my notes. So even though the video is about the 5Ws, my lesson today is only about who, what, and where. So I'm going to ignore those other parts of the 5W and really hone in on just those 3 parts. Okay. Remember, just because the lesson of the curriculum might go a little step further, if that's not your learning goal, it's okay to leave it for another day. All right. You want your child to achieve that learning goal. So those other extra things, they might be there, but it's okay to leave them be or not really put as much attention or emphasis on those type of questions. All right. So let's go ahead and number 3, we're going to go into, number 3. Number 1 is our hook. Number 2 is our teaching method. So how are we going to teach this information? That is super important. And the classic way is the I do, we do, you do method. All right. I do is simply you're modeling how to do you're modeling how to ask the question perhaps. We do is you and the child are asking questions about the text, or maybe you're asking the child questions and vice versa. You guys are doing the activity together. And then finally, you do is your child. So your child will actually end up doing the activity by themselves. This is a classical teaching method that many homeschoolers use on a regular basis. And it's just the proof is in the pudding with the teaching method. But just because we're doing I do, we do, you do, and that's the method we decide to do for this lesson, that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't use a different method the next time. Like maybe you want to do a project based. Maybe you want to do a game, play a game and kind of walk through and talk through a game. There's so many different types of other teaching methods that can really bring the learning goal to the forefront. But this one, the I do, we do, you do method, oftentimes is the one to really hone in on the concept. All right. So in our case with Susan, I will read a short part of the text and model a question. Who is this section about? Is the question I'll probably ask. The we do portion would be we ask a question together. What happened in this part, right? And then maybe she'll ask a what question. Hey, can you ask me a what question? A question that starts with what according to this section of the text, right? And then of course the you do. So maybe at the end, I'm like, can you create or even tell me a question that you can ask about the next section of the text, right? So we started off with me and her, then we did it together, and then all of a sudden the child does it by themselves. That process is going to help nail in that information and help the child get to the learning goal. All right, so now let's go ahead and get to number 3. All right, is resources. Now this is the time to integrate our resources. Now that we have our teaching method, we've chosen our hook, we've chosen our teaching method. Now we're going to use resources to really bring it all together. So we said that we're going to read a text. So why not use the curriculum and use a text and have them ask a question about the text, or use a book or anything of that nature. So resources can be worksheets, curriculums, games, notebooks, whatever you have to bring that lesson to life. Those you're going to use those to get closer to the learning goal by using the teaching method, using the teaching method to teach whatever resources you have. All right. Using what you have is super important and it's resourceful. So yes, that is number 3. All right. Number 5, it would be student practice. So after you have created your hook, you've created your teaching method, you know what teaching method you're using, and you put in your resources into the lesson plan. Now you're going to make sure that you have student practice within the lesson plan. So what can the child do with you or independently that is going to hone in and have them achieve that learning goal? So for me, I'll probably just be like, okay, could you fill out this summary or something like that of, maybe what's your favorite 5W question? Which one would you prefer to ask about a text? A who question, a where question, or a what question? That could be a way that you can see what they're thinking. Or of course, getting a worksheet or a practice sheet, or even have them write it on a whiteboard, whatever you can find for them to show what they know. Practice, practice, practice is where you'll be able to see the learning. All right. So that means writing questions, discussing answers, and highlighting text evidence. All right. If your child is doing the work, learning is happening. So remember that. All right. So then number 5, at the end, you will have a formative or summative assessment. All right, so it just depends on how far along these lessons have been going. Eventually, you do want to make sure that you do a little quick check. Most of the days, you're just going to do a formative assessment. That just simply means, hey, I am listening to questions, observing responses, right? That's simple. So you're listening to questions and you're observing responses and you're just seeing, does my child get it? All right. It doesn't have to be anything that they could put on paper. It could be a quick write. A quick write is simply they just write as much as they can about what they learned. It could be, them just telling you what they have learned in their own words. There's so many different ways that you can simply kind of check what they've known. Or just, if you give them a practice sheet from the curriculum, checking the curriculum and making sure they have the understanding. Now, a summative response is a little more, it's a lot more formal. So that would be like a quiz or a test on what they know. And this is important because you can use this data to see is what you're teaching sticking or not. For example, when I'm implementing this lesson, today we practice asking, after you have done the summative, you're going to end with a close, all right? And closing the lesson is also important, how you close. And that's simply just restating the lesson. So you can put that at the end, or you can just give yourself a mental note, hey, I need to make sure that I restate what we just learned, just to make sure that, hey, we did the activity. All right, now I'm reinstating it. So you're going to put a lesson close. So that will look like, in our example, it will look like, today we practice asking who, what, and where questions before and during a reading. We use those questions to better understand the text and stay engaged with the story. All right. So that closing shows that the lesson met the learning goal. So by restating, just basically at the end, you're restating what you did. That's it. In relation to the learning goal. That will help you prove, oh, I actually know where we went today. And then your child's like, oh, okay, so that's why we learned that, so that we could get closer to a learning goal. That's important. That's where it clicks. All right. Last but not least is flexibility. All right. Make sure that after you've done all the structure, you have done the hook. Well, first of all, you did your standards. You have your standards and your learning target. You have your hook. You have your teaching method. You have your resources. You've already implemented your your student practice, and then finally your formative assessment. So that last piece is flexibility. Okay. Flexibility is what's really going to make it. And flexibility is simply just going with the flow and having everything organized and ready to lesson plan according to what happens with this lesson. All right. So good lesson planning means that, hey, I can plan for this day and this week, but then using all the data from how my child takes on the different activities that I have planned out for them. If it goes great, we can move on and maybe we can move up. And if it goes, hey, maybe they need to slow down a little bit to really understand each part, then guess what? Depending on how they perform on that lesson, we can change it the next time so that it better fits our child. So the last part of the structure is flexibility. So that comes with reflection. When you reflect about your teaching and you reflect about how the lesson plan went, this is where growth happens, and this is where you see yourself becoming a better teacher, and then your child also falling in line and also just making those strides and becoming better at whatever you're teaching them. Okay. So just for example, let's just say little Susan was struggling with putting them all together with the who, what, and where, right? So I know the next time when I lesson plan, I'm gonna make a little note and I'm gonna say, what we're going to do instead is we are going to take out the who, what, and where, and we're just going to put them on different days. Maybe Monday, we're going to focus on who, and Tuesday, we're going to focus on what, and Wednesday, we're going to focus on where. We're just going to focus on each of the 5 W's independently. That would be a way that we can implement that in the example that I brought up earlier. All right. So I hope that all of this is clear. I know this may have been a lot of information, but remember, you guys can do this, and let's go ahead and lead into our biblical moments of the video. All right. So as homeschool parents, we plan because we care, but we trust God with the outcome. Proverbs 16:9 says, a man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. All right. So lesson planning is us preparing well and teaching intentionally while trusting God to guide each step, even when lessons need adjusting. All right. So keep that in mind. And just a final encouragement, if you don't need a perfect lesson plan. You need clear goals, a simple structure, and grace to adjust. All right. So here's our final anchor line. Plan with clarity, teach with flexibility, and trust God with growth. At the end of the day, he's the only one that's going to bring increase. He's the only one that's going to bring clarity. He's the main one that's going to be able to guide you through this. So I hope that this video has been helpful. I hope you have a better structure on how to tackle a lesson plan. All right. And actually coming up, I will be showing you guys in a few videos or so in the next video how to do a lesson plan in real time. So you actually see a screen, you'll actually see me how to break it down. And that will probably bring what I've been saying in this video and the previous video about what a lesson plan and what a lesson plan is not. If you have not checked that out, please go ahead and check that out on the playlist, on the Homeschool Success Framework playlist. Or, it's also one of my most recent videos. But yes, so if this all seems like it's wow, this is a lot, I'm actually going to show it in real time so you can actually see it, understand it, and better get equipped for success. So I will see you guys the next time. Thank you so much. And remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you find this channel helpful, and also to help those other homeschool parents out there who may need a little bit more guidance and just community. So I just thank you guys so much for your time. Grace and peace. Bye-bye.